Hey everybody, welcome to the Games Tavern Happy Hour. This week, sitting on the other side, we have Prim. Rob has the week off, so we're going to see what Prim has to say about today's topic. How you doing over there, Prim?
It's going pretty well. Thanks for having me on. It'll be nice to have a nice chat with you tonight.
Yeah, it's. I figured it should be a good one. This one is we've done the tips for here we go. Done the tips for how to get in as a new player. We've done. Oh, sorry, gotta get rid of the cat. Bye. Yeah, so we've. There we go. I lost focus. Well, anyway, while I try to solve this problem, why don't you go ahead and tell us what's going on today?
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about session zero, which I think is something that can be easily overlooked if you're not deeply experienced with doing role playing games, especially tabletop role playing games. But I think is like an actually essential feature of any campaign, be it a one shot or even something you could do for multiple years. Um, there kind of needs to be a moment where you kind of sit down and talk about shared expectations because if there's a mismatch, if there's a disconnect, people are expecting one thing and getting another, then it can really lead to some problems down the line, something that you want to iron out at the beginning. So that's a firm foundation for a really great and fun campaign.
Absolutely. That's I couldn't have said it better myself. There, it's necessary to build the expectation so everyone can come around the table and have a good time.
Yeah.
So, since we are diving into talking about dungeon mastering, people out there probably I've mentioned what I've done. What kind of DMing and GMing experience do you have under your belt?
Yeah, so I'm usually the player, but I have done some DMing. I ran a campaign for some friends out of my house like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
We ran through the Lost Mine of Phandelver. That was a lot of fun, especially since not everyone in the party was an experienced D&D player. Um, I've also done a lot of DMing for Adventurers League stuff. So for International Board Game Day, ran some adventures. I actually even ran the Epic at the UK Games Expo a couple years ago,
Oh,
and that was a
nice.
really interesting experience.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Um, yeah, it's DMing is such a different experience than playing, and it's rewarding in very different ways. And it's just it's harder work than playing for obvious reasons, but it's also a lot more rewarding too. So
There's a
I'm
lot more
not lazy.
homework.
Yes, but I'm not being lazy. I think DMing's more fun, but I'm usually very lazy. So
No, I totally understand that. So, because we're going into the session zero stuff today, with the importance of actually laying out the foundations and managing expectations, I do want to let everyone out there know if you have any questions about that, please let us know. We have the chat there, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. I'm managing both the chat and the camera and all that, so there might be a little bit of a delay, but we'll get you to it.
I'm reading chat too, so
Okay.
don't worry about that. I got an eye on him.
But
Watching
then
you.
one of the things that we're really trying to stress here is there really is no right way to be playing these role playing games, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Dungeon Crawl Classics, really any of that kind of stuff. There's no right way to play this. What we're presenting here is just a bunch of tips. These are things that work for us, things that if you might, everybody at your table is not having as much fun as you think they should be, try peppering some of these in. These might help. These might bring you up to the next level and get you out there to having people walk away just like, wow, that was a great time. Or if you're a player, everyone else being like, yeah, that was great too. Well, we loved it. So these are really just tips to try and get a conversation going and get everybody hopefully raising the bar a little bit. This is not law. None of us are authors writing for this stuff. We're not the guys that hold the rules and are telling you your game is wrong. Absolutely not what we're trying to do here.
Agree completely. There's no one authoritative checklist for doing a session zero, and it really depends on who you're playing with. Are the people you've played with before and you know very well? Are they complete strangers? Is this a one shot? Is this an Adventures League game? Is this a expansive campaign? Like all of these things are going to dictate the sort of questions and discussions you need to have during session zero, and there is no one size fits all answer to this. You
Absolutely.
really just need to use your best judgment as to what conversations you need to have with your party to get yourself on the best footing.
Now, one of the big things about Session Zeros is that it is really about talking to the players to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Everybody basically managing expectations so that everybody knows what they're getting into. Uh, it can be whether it's like, hey, this is a game nobody's ever played before, like we had on Sunday, and our session zero was about a half hour before, so it wasn't actually a full blown just 2 hours of sitting down rolling characters and everything. It was pretty light for a session zero as far as those go, but it helped to set the tone for everything. If you're doing a longer campaign, it might be worth setting aside a whole night just so you can hammer out all the small kinks to have some of the problems that players might have. One of the things I find when I'm running campaigns is making sure that everybody knows what we're going to be playing. Uh, one of the biggest mistakes you can have is everybody wants to go and play Lord of the Rings, where they start in a small town and they go on a giant cross-continent adventure. And I just have so many great dungeons that I'm just going to be feeding you guys through the entire time, and nobody's really going to find that experience fulfilling because it's sort of at odds with each other. So you got to make sure everyone's talking and at the same point.
Absolutely. And also think like if you're coming from a different game system, it can set you up with very different expectations as to what a role-playing game looks like. Like if you're used to D&D and you go into a vampire game, for instance, you may have very different expectations of what a normal session for a role-playing game is going to be based on the fact that it's just an entirely different system, an entirely different tone of the story. So yeah, setting up expectations I think is very important.
Now, I'm a big fan of running pre-built adventures. When I was in my last place up in New Jersey, I was part of a group that our regular DM would end up. He also liked running the adventure paths because we were playing Pathfinder, but he really liked running those because it allowed him to do. There's still a lot of work involved with that, but it allowed him to have most of the framing of it already built out. So before every campaign, he'd be like, "Hey guys, I'm getting ready to run something else. What kind of thing are you guys thinking about running? We can run a Dark Suns campaign where it's sort of an evil thing. I think that's the one where magic's banned, or that's a different one.
I never played it, so I can't really tell you.
There's a couple settings where things get weird, and he wouldn't tell us what the plot of it was, so much as give us the back of the book blurb. Where it's like, hey, so this campaign, the last one that I played was Reign of Winter. It was, again, another Pathfinder campaign. But that one ends up where winter is setting down, and you're going to have to go fight with basically Baba Yaga and all of Russian mythology. And I'm not going to spoil it because it does get some wild aha moments. If anybody played in my games, I love those reveals. But there was some that was like, this is wild. I can't believe did that seriously just happen? And it's all just pre-written in the book. But he would come and be, hey, do you guys want to go play Dark Sun, play in a standard fantasy setting, or play this thing where we're playing with Russian folklore? And we chose Russian folklore, hands down. But
that was clearly the right choice.
Yeah, it was fantastic. But being able to have that back of the book blurb, sort of just a quick 1 or 2 minutes, just like, hey, so these are the options that we have before us, or this is the campaign I am running. If this doesn't jive for you, there's, in our group, like at the Games Tavern, we are spoiled for choice for DMs. We have 5 or 6 of us actively running things periodically. So it's very easy for, hey, this isn't the thing for me. I can bow out of this and let someone else take this slot. So we can have lots of options to play that kind of thing. If you don't have that, if it's just one GM or one DM playing a game or running the games, it's worth having that conversation beforehand to say, okay, make sure everybody's comfortable with where you're going.
Yeah. So I think another sort of axis along which we kind of need to have this conversation is also, is this a story or is this a sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Because, I've been in games where the DM basically just like presents a universe to you and you just kind of go in any direction, he'll build the universe out from there. But there's also like the other side of that where someone's basically written their fantasy novel and they want your character to sort of inhabit that world and follow that story. And if you're not content to sort of like, latch onto the story hooks and let your characters be carried along with that, then you're going to have a bad time. Like you want the more sandboxy thing. And you don't want to be like you don't want to be wanting a sandbox and then your DM wanting the story, and you're both pulling against each other the entire campaign. It's just going to be a bad time.
Yeah, if I've built my fantastic series of dungeons, and you guys just want to go hang out and listen to water deep politics, I'm unprepared for that. Or at least knowing that that's what you want to do, I'm gonna have to figure out some times, guys, to get you in there and do the homework to make that happen. It's one of the things going around right now is I think there was a Kotaku article recently where they were talking about how it's not about you as a GM, it's about the players, and that is true to some point. But on the other hand, you are one of the players. It's you're there to have as good a time as anybody else, and if you're not happy with where things are going, the best tip we can give you is talk to your players. Let them know it can be at session 0 or it can be 5 or 6 sessions in. Just be like, hey, this isn't what I was thinking. I might not have made it clear what I was thinking on this. Let's talk, see if we can come to some kind of compromise to make sure everyone's still having a good time as we go along. Every group I've been part of has had that conversation to some degree, and it's gone well because we're pretty much all adults here. We all know it's like, oh, hey, sorry, yeah, I was really intrigued by this, I don't know, goblin supply chain or whatever.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more because I feel like so much of everything we're going to say tonight basically boils down to don't be afraid to have an adult conversation with the people in your group. And session 0 gives a good sort of opportunity to lay the foundation for that, but it's an ongoing conversation. In many ways, like if you're doing it right, session 0 should never end. It should be an ongoing thread throughout your entire campaign where you check back in with each other to make sure that everyone's still on the same page.
Yeah, it sets the seeds, sort of says, hey, as the dungeon master, I have an open door policy. We can talk, we can address any of the issues we're going to be talking about in this thing as the situation changes.
Yeah, I have to say, like one of my guilty pleasures during quarantine has been reading some of the D&D or role playing game horror story websites,
those are always fun, yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, like there's when you read enough of them, there reoccurring patterns appear. Now, some of them are like that guy, kind of going in and wrecking things, but like most of the problems that seem to crop up in these horror stories is just a failure to communicate, a failure for one person who is frustrated to talk about those frustrations in an adult and non-threatening way with the other adults around them.
Yeah.
And like open communication at every point is absolutely key. If you don't have that conversation in session 0, it's never too late to kind of go back and have that conversation. Even if you like you need to change your mind or something's come up, like you have that conversation.
Yeah, that's great. That's definitely a failure of communication is definitely one of the biggest problems I've seen in any role playing system I've had. If I have a problem and I don't let the game master know, it's not going to solve itself. The game master, if when I'm behind the screen, if I'm not getting negative feedback, I'm assuming the players are enjoying themselves, and that's not absolutely verbal negative feedback. They can also be somebody looks disinterested behind the counter or on the other side of the screen. Somebody they're on their phone or they don't seem passionate about it. You can see that counts as feedback too if you're a perceptive GM. But
Yeah.
if I'm not seeing any of that and I'm not getting a hey that didn't go too well, I'm just going to keep doing what I want to do. And GMs aren't mind readers. So let us know what it is that you're having a problem with. Let us know what it is you want out of stuff. I can't guarantee as any of my games that you're going to get exactly what you're asking for, but I'm also there to make sure that you guys have a good time. So I'll try and give you if you ask for if you ask for an orange, I might give you a clementine. I might give you some other type of very similar fruit, but I'm not going to give you exactly the magical thing that you're looking for, this exact story arc. But I want to know what you like.
Yeah, like people have to meet each other halfway.
Yeah.
Like you don't get the opportunity to make unreasonable demands, but at the same token, though, like if you are not enjoying the game, then like you said that there's no way to play the game wrong. But if you're not enjoying the game, somebody's playing the game wrong.
Yeah.
Like you need to have that conversation and get to the point where everyone's having a good time, or maybe consider maybe this isn't the right game for you.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to go find a different game. That happens too.
So now we're going to do a slight transition into the more I don't want to say controversial topics because that's not the one, but the ones that are more tinderbox for causing anger between players. And these are going to all pack into things that I know that we've recently on the Games Tavern Network Discord, we've been having some weird, not really heated, but they got a little awkward. For these are basically tone and lethality in games, and some of the like rules as written kind of stuff. So where do you sit on this kind of thing? On how do you mitigate these problems before they become problems? Hopefully.
Well, I definitely think like when it comes to the journal story, I mean, it's the same way that you need to talk about like whether this is like a story thing or a sandboxy thing. Tone has a huge impact on the day to day way the game plays. So if you are imagining a, like a world where it's all political intrigue and it's a lot more role playing heavy, and your players want to have something that's much more of a dungeon crawl where they hit things with their sword, then they're going to resist your political intrigue thing, and you're not going to have the dungeons they want to have.
Yeah.
So that's something you want to kind of have in there. But it's also like, is it a dark campaign? Is it a low magic setting? Is it, are dark things and bad things going to happen on a more regular basis, or is it more of a lighthearted, goofy sort of thing? Like, are we having Scooby Doo mysteries and doing investigations, and everyone's kind of like, a bright little ray of sunshine?
Jinkies.
Those are very different things. And if you try to have like, if the goofball shows up for the grimdark campaign, and you have basically like Krusty the Clown at trying to run through Curse of Strahd, uh, it's going to be kind of a disconnect.
I mean, I'd watch that. That sounds fantastic, but
yeah, but only everyone's on board for that. Like, if
you.
everyone's showing up to the Curse of Strahd wearing clown shoes, that's a great time. But like, if you've got like 3 people that are walking off the page of a Bram Stoker novel, and they have somebody wearing like big red nose, it's like someone's going to get grumpy about this situation.
Yeah.
And it's best to kind of lay that out as like, this is sort of the overall atmosphere that we were aiming for this. If you do this, this, or this, it'll be disruptive to the overall tone.
Yeah, that's even outside of campaigns, tone is one of the things that I've always had a system wise. Every system I found has a very specific feel to it. Like Dungeons and Dragons, you have a lot of flexibility to it, but it's still a high fantasy sword and sorcery. But Fifth edition in particular is a much more forgiving system than old Dungeons and Dragons was, and that's great. I love that because it helps to get people into the game and isn't like, hey, you rolled a character, yeah, they're dead, try again. That's not a thing. This is a great gateway game into the system, but it is generally not the wackiest thing in the world. But by rules, you have to sort of change them around or build the tone specifically for it to be wacky. But the like Dungeon Crawl Classics that we played though doesn't really function as a grim, serious system. It's just all of the adventure paths that come out with it. Even the super serious ones are still rather tongue in cheek and fun, wacky, have a good time kind of systems. So it's important to know what it is to set expectations on that front because again, you don't want the clown running around at Strahd.
Yeah, like there's a world of difference between what you should be expecting going into, um, Call of Cthulhu versus Honey Heist, where you were playing.
By the way, we're gonna play Honey Heist, right? This is happening.
By the way, if anyone in the audience doesn't know what Honey Heist is, it is a 1-page rule book that gives you rules for running a game where everyone plays a bear and you are trying to rob HoneyCon, which is you just basically steal as much honey as possible. But yeah, so that it's a fun thing we should definitely do as a one shot. But like again, I think that like everyone kind of has a sense of like what are we looking for out of this game? Is it something more lighthearted, something darker, or something kind of in between? That's something that needs to be established right away.
Yeah, another very important thing to establish is lethality in a game. I like games that are very, very dangerous for the players. That's whether I'm running them or I'm playing in them. I like that because that's the most binary sense of failure or of risk. A character dies, that's awful, and I like that extreme risk there. I know a lot of people don't like that. So setting the tone and basically polling the table before I get going is kind of vital in every one of my games. Just because if I'm doing the thing I think is great and I have a newer player who's never experienced a player death before, and I'm like, hey, congratulations, go check out this unlocked treasure chest over here. Oh, it's a mimic in the first room. How'd you get? And that can put someone off on D&D, and that can ruin somebody's experience with the party if they don't enjoy that same level or somewhere approaching that level of lethality.
Especially since like people get really attached to their characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like if this is if you went out on like Hero Forge, you got your custom mini and you spent like 2 hours painting it, and like you have all like the matching dice set, like you've gotten really invested in this character and like their 18-page backstory, and they die in the first dungeon because they miss their wisdom save or something like that. It feels bad.
Yeah,
uh
it does. I prefer to save it for like dungeon like 5 or 6, and then bring out a tea kettle and just like, yeah, make my tea salty. Let's do this. Tears of players. Blah, 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 blah.
Also, like on a related point, what happens if a character dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this a universe where resurrection is going to be readily available, or is it something where you die, or something kind of in between? Like, there's sometimes where a main character death serves as a kind of a linchpin for the campaign at the store. The rest of the party goes on a quest to get their friend back.
Yeah, a rallying cry to make it go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just like having that sort of thing of like, should you expect your character to die? Like, is it a likely scenario? And I think that there's also a healthy balance between Bed of Nails and Pillow Fort, where there is danger. Your character may die, but the DM isn't trying to kill you, or the DM isn't going to be capriciously violent with the party.
Yeah, and outside of running Dungeon Crawl Classics, I don't go at them. I like high death scenarios, but I don't go out of the way to gotcha on the players. That's no fun for anybody. And if you are chasing actively as a DM, going around and killing your players because you wanted to, and it's not a I don't want to say a punch, a consequence for something that they've done on their end. It's like surprise round, guillotine, falls down and cuts your head off. Why? That doesn't do anything for me. Again, unless I signed up for that kind of game. But just in a general 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons thing, no, don't do that. That's not cool. If you're doing that as a DM, you're that guy.
I do have to say though, there's an exception to every rule. So I ran through as a player a one shot. I think it's called the Minds of Madness, where it's like an Old Testament style 2nd edition sort of mentality of this like arbitrarily lethal dungeon. And
I love those. Those are my favorite.
So the DM Joe shows up with this stack of pre-built character sheets. And the whole idea is like when your character dies, and they're gonna, you just crumple your character sheet up, toss it in the garbage, you take the character sheet on top, and that's who you're playing.
Yeah, I've seen that kind of thing that works really well. Dungeon Crawl Classics works really well. Having that parachute for a high lethality dungeon, I think is the middle ground I found works really, really well. But just dropping that on your players when they're not expecting that, that's a problem, and you really need to be checking that out if you're that DM.
Absolutely, like getting into like there's no wrong way to play the game. This is the wrong way to play the game, though. It shouldn't be an adversarial relationship between the DM and the players. Like
again, unless that's what they want. Like that's.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I feel like if the DM's trying to win at D&D, then like it's probably not going to be a great time. But maybe
go write your fantasy novel. Like that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see where else. Well, there's the rules as written and chapter and all that, but we can actually tie that into the next section when we get down there with house rules. The final one is just logistics, campaign length, scheduling. How are you guys going to handle absences? How do you do that? I'll give my answer in a second, but I'm curious how what you have to say about just general getting people around a table.
I mean, obviously, like I think that's kind of the first conversation I actually have with people. Like, do we even have the time in our schedule to have this D&D campaign? So the answer is no. We don't even go through the rest of the session 0 list. Yeah. Now, I prefer to do a campaign on either a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, and like having a regular scheduled time for that. Like it's going to be Tuesdays at 6 or whatever it is. So that way people just have that blocked off on their schedule, and they know like this is the thing that I'm doing at Tuesday at 6 p.m.
Yeah, the rhythm really does. I think that's that nice. Gets you through the week until the weekend.
Yeah, but like that's not going to work for every campaign. So people have a much more ad hoc scheduling just because of their lifestyle, and that's fine as long as everyone agrees with that.
Yeah.
The real problem comes in is where everyone has an agreement of like, okay, we're going to do it on Tuesdays at 6, and then somebody comes in, at lunchtime on Tuesday going like, oh, I can't make it, I got a date tonight or something like that. Like, setting up, if you agree to do this campaign, then you need to be there or else.
Yeah, and there are valid reasons for missing, but another social event isn't one of those. If you've
Yes.
agreed, if you've committed to us, commit. Like this is poker night with the guys. This is that's the only social activity I know, and I don't even play poker.
Or, like it shouldn't be the thing that you do if you don't have anything better to do.
Mhm.
Like it's a social commitment, and it should be kind
Yeah,
of conveyed as being a responsibility. It's like if you just arbitrarily don't show up for this, and you don't have a good excuse, then it's screwing up everyone else's Tuesday night plan.
yeah. The
And
way
look,
I've
yeah.
seen it run in the last campaign that wasn't part of the Games Tavern uh, was basically we played Thursdays. Every Thursday, 7 o'clock dice start rolling. So try and show up by 6:30, somewhere in that window, and you'd still get people rolling in a little bit later.
Mhm.
Uh, but starting on Tuesday, we do the roll call. It's like, hey, just making sure everybody's still good on this, uh, because the DM is putting a lot of work into this and doesn't want to show up and play. If there's 6 people at the party, run with 2 people. That's problematic. And we've got some really fun one shots out of that kind of thing, but it's an issue. So when you as a player side of things, because you said you play more than you DM, what's your preferred method for if you're not going to be there and the party and the adventure is still going to continue? How do you like to see that go? What do you want to have happen with your character? They just wander off and do something else, or the DM only makes dice rolls when they're having combat or something, or how do you like seeing that go? Or they play them the entire time?
Uh, I'm territorial about my characters, so I don't like the idea of somebody else sort of puppeting them. Um, so I've seen it done a few different ways that I think are effective. So some of them are like a story depending. If you're not in the middle of a dungeon,
Yeah.
um, then that person goes off and does like some downtime activity off screen. Um, that's one way to handle it. If that doesn't work, then there's ways of sort of like hand waving it of like they're in the fight. We're just not going to focus on what they're doing during the fight. Um, or alternately, you can go full like the DM puppets that character. They have a with the permission of the missing player, another player step in and take over controls for that character. Um, and I think that it sort of depends on where you are in that campaign at that particular moment, how easy it is to write your character out, and what you're comfortable with. Um, but the same token, though, if I'm the one missing the game, I'm more inclined to go with like, hey, whatever works best for the party and the group, because
Yeah.
like I'm the one putting them out. So I tend not to get too territorial about that, just because I realize I'm the one who's kind of creating the inconvenience. But it is something that it's much better to have the conversation beforehand, then come back and find out like, oh well, we gave your character to Steve, and Steve got your character killed, so re-roll. Like those sort of situations, which do happen to people.
Yeah, that's less than good.
Yeah, yeah. Like this has gone very badly if people don't handle it in a responsible adult way. So I think having that conversation beforehand instead of coming back in, it's like, what did you do, is probably the best way of handling this.
Yeah, my ideal way of seeing this, and this is how we always ran it before, is, in my old groups, was if someone's not there, their character is just having a bad day or whatever, and isn't really interacting socially and all that. But when the fights start, and the fights are generally spec'd for the size of the party that we have, when the fights start, they'll be fighting in the back rank or something, unless they're our frontline fighter and we need them. Okay, then the GM's gonna make that happen because you've got to have that person up there doing that if they can't fit in an NPC logically to make that thing work. As far as killing a player that's there, only happens on TPKs. That's it. If everybody else dies, sorry, your character doesn't get to survive. They were there and they fought valiantly to the end, and here's an epic bard poem about it. But beyond that, if everybody else in the party walked away and you don't, that almost feels like it's punishing you for not being there, and that's not cool. Everybody has real life commitments that pop up unexpectedly.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that pretty much runs into that. The scheduling thing, I typically actually have that happen way before Session Zero even happens. Like, it's like, hey, I'm going to be running a campaign on Mondays. Who's interested? Let's do this. And then that's from there, then we start picking into that stuff. But knowing about what's going to be different about your campaign, the whole sort of meat and potatoes of what a Session Zero is going to be getting at, uh, Yeah, so we that's where we're moving into here. It's the how do you run your games? What are the things that you do that aren't exactly rules as written, or which choice in the options are you going to do? House rules is a big thing here. There's a lot of rules in the rulebook that people think are not optional rules or are optional rules. There's a lot of confusion out there, or people think something that's not in the rulebook is, and because no one actually reads the PHP cover to cover, those people are madmen. So there's a lot of things like that. Critical fumbles is one of the big ones. People think that that's a rule in the rulebook. If it is, and I don't know honestly,
it is absolutely not.
it,
It is the world's most hated
yeah,
house rule.
I love that rule. I think it's a lot of fun. Like when I was playing in the Pathfinder campaigns, they had a critical fumble deck where when you roll and you get a 1, first you have to confirm it by basically rolling again. And if that second roll wasn't going to hit, then it is a critical fumble as opposed to a straight miss. Then you draw from the deck and something wacky happens. And it's ranging from you disarm to you trip to you decapitate yourself. It's a wide spectrum. And
I just
it's
I hate
almost
it
never
though
that
because well the problem with critical fumbles is that if you're a really competent person in a particular area, it still implies that 5% of the time you're going to do something crazy. Like if there was a 5% chance that every time you drove your car, you'd wrap it around a telephone pole, no one would ever drive cars. It's like the whole thing is like, Brad Pitt has a charisma score of 20, but what if every time he talked to a woman, he threw up on himself? Like 5% of the time. Like it's
that's why I like
it's so excessive. It's so excessive.
That's why I like the old Pathfinder mechanic of confirming the fumble, because you had to confirm criticals in Pathfinder before you get to activate the really cool critical ability. Because they had a whole mechanical thing going on for Pathfinder version 1 for making criticals happen. But it was the same thing where you roll a natural 20, okay, then you roll again. If your second die would hit naturally, or would hit without it being a critical, then you get the critical thing. So you get a draw from the critical deck. And it was the same thing where you do a little bit extra damage, you do double damage, you light them on fire somehow, or whatever, and you get some really cool thematic ability. I recognize that that's not a thing a lot of people, a lot of groups don't like to play with. But that's a house rule that if it fits in reasonably, I like to try to fit it in. I haven't found a way to work it with 50 yet, though. So that's a problem.
But again, it's okay if you have house rules. Like some of the other more common ones are like, ignore encumbrance for gold, for instance.
Yeah.
Gold's heavier than lead. Like no one wants to deal with how much 500 gold pieces actually weighs. So like these sort of like hand wavy house rules or what have you are good things to sort of mention. Also like feats. In 5th edition, feats are allowed at DM's discretion, even though they're in the PHB.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on rolling to the table at level 1 with a variant human, then you need to okay that with the DM first. Like, hey, is it okay if I show up with somebody with a feat? And they'll like 90% of the time they'll say sure, but technically it's an option in the book, and so that's technically a house rule. So yeah, just like again, setting expectation. Like these are the sort of things that I like to do. Here are the little picadillos I have with the rules. Is so that it needs to be established early on, so people don't find out about critical fumbles in the first combat encounter.
Yeah, that's definitely something you need to let people know about. Personally, when I'm running any system that has an encumbrance thing, I generally ignore it unless unless the person's being stupid about it. Like it's the guy walking around with 15 great axes and a handful of swords and 3 suits of armor. It's like, no, man, you get one. You're gonna have to pare this back, or you're gonna have a 5-foot movement speed. Like that's simply how it's gonna happen. Just because I don't like doing math, period, which is weird for being Dungeons and Dragons, which is just math the game.
I mean, I think it's why almost every adventuring party eventually gets a bag of holding. Because I think even the DM's like, I don't want to do this math. I just don't. Just everything goes in the bag and just shut up. We'll never speak of it again.
Yeah, pretty much. So other things, and this is a preference that I know a lot of people have. A lot of people nowadays for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, new players, really love getting the battle map, putting your minis out and pushing them around and be like, oh, I know exactly where I am. Some of the people who've been playing around for a little bit longer like to play with Theater of the Mind. Where do you fall on this? And it's definitely worth letting your characters or your players know straight out. But where do you fall on this? What's your favorite method? And neither of them are wrong, but one of them will get you mocked mercilessly.
Sure, I use battle mats,
Uh,
but I don't like doing the full models because I think that's just like, man, that's an insane amount of work to do for like one encounter or what have you.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but there's people that's their hobby and they like doing that. Go for it. I'm much more lazy. I like the dry erase battle mat because when you read the rules for fifth edition D&D, it is sort of a mini game that has like a role playing game kind of wrapped around it, where there's like a miniature game, mini game inside the RPG. And so since a lot of the combat rules really deal with who's adjacent to who and what the orientation is,
Yeah.
it's a little bit easier with the rules making it cleaner to use the battle mat. I think that's just more useful for making the battles feel a bit more strategic, of like being able to precisely know where your character is and plotting at your next turns. But I've also played Theater of the Mind. I had it fun. Like, I don't have a strong preference for it, but when I run the games, I use a battle mat.
That makes sense. I personally prefer using Theater of the Mind. And one of the things I'm super excited about with this quarantine session that's going on right now is I can just, it's really easy to boot that up. You pull out your video conferencing app of choice, break out your dice, trust your players on the other side, and go with it. It makes things pretty simple, I think. But we're going to actually get into, because it's topical and relevant right now. Next week, we're going to be getting into how to play RPGs over the internet. Some of the ways we've done it, some of the ways that a lot of people outside the world, outside here, are recommending doing it. But even around the table, I still prefer to do Theater of the Mind. Part of that is because I'm lazy, and I like to, if I'm putting minis on the table, I want them to be fully painted and beautiful, and I don't have that kind of time. And if I put unpainted miniatures on the table, it gets kind of it's like, that doesn't work.
I imagine it that my miniatures is the marble statue that will eventually be made in remembrance of my character's heroics.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's why it's gray.
It's pre-primed. Just
yeah.
Come on.
Just a reminder for everyone out there, if you're not familiar, you can use battle maps online. Roll20 is a great free site that allow you to do that. I personally find the controls on Roll20 leave a lot to be desired, but we used it for a game yesterday and it worked just fine. It doesn't have to be gorgeous in order for it to be functional.
Oh, absolutely not. One of the ways that I found, and again, we'll get dig into this next week, but I basically did didn't do it for this one, but for a DCC I ran last weekend. I basically made a slideshow of the map, and it's like, hey, so this is the room that you guys are going in. This is so I don't have to describe it to you 18,000 times. This is what you see, but we're still going to be talking. We're still going to be playing Theater of the Mind, where your guys move, where the enemies are, and all that, because I don't understand technology. But yeah, so one of the great ways that I found for doing battle mats, if you're sort of a perfectionist like I am on getting your minis painted and you can't play with unpainted minis, are the standees, little cardboard cutouts, or there's a couple companies that are making like the clear vinyl ones now, and they're just double-sided miniature tokens. They're just vertical as opposed to horizontal.
Did you make pre-painted minis now as well?
Yeah, those are a little expensive though.
They not always. There's still to be found. Of course, there's also my preferred way of getting a mini painted, which is a big front to someone who does have artistic talent, and then just ask them. Is a very effective and underrated tool for getting your miniature painted.
It's underrated for reasons, just because like I don't have that time. Like I can't get my minis painted. So
I mean, bribes also work.
That is true, which is actually a fantastic segue. Way to go. For expectations at the table, one of the foremost is being snacks. How are you going to do this? Can you do this? Personally, I prefer to have like sort of potluck kind of things. Like, hey, everybody bring something, bring a snack, bring a beverage. Not necessary. It's not it's not a rule. I'm happy to provide if I'm hosting. But if you want something in particular, or you want to have it be more bountiful, please bring something. I've seen people talk where it's like the DM brings it, or everybody but the DM brings it, or it's a rotating schedule, that kind of thing. That's definitely a conversation you need to have beforehand if you are expecting, and it doesn't have to be a GM-led conversation. It can just be anybody around the table. If they're expecting food at the table, ask about food at the table. Make those plans.
Yeah, my preferred rule is like if you're eating and drinking, you better be contributing. It may not necessarily be every single week, but if it's like a rotating thing, then that's fine. Or if it's everybody's like something every time, it's fine as well. But if the DM's buying all the beer and Dave never chips in, Dave needs to knock that shit out and contribute.
Mm-hmm. Or Dave will just have his player killed or his character
Yeah.
killed. I'm cool with that too. I'm more than happy to take tribute out in death.
So long as you establish that in session 0. Be aware that if you are creating party fouls and always drinking and never buying, then be prepared that your character may be eaten by a grue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. Another expectation to talk about is really there's no good times to be doing this. Phones at the table.
Oh God, yes.
I know we're all busy. I know we all have lives outside of this, but you can't put 3 hours away, or put your phone on do not disturb or something like that. It's kind of an even bigger temptation nowadays, when we're all doing this through the internet, where it's like, oh well, I'm here, I'm looking at you. I also have my browser up. I'm using it for the talking points that we have, but it's just one of those. Yeah, it's very easy to get distracted. Have the courtesy to you've dedicated to this. Be here, please, physically and mentally. Please be here. Let's don't be talking to your other friend group about what you're doing tomorrow night.
Even more, especially more so when there's been times when I'm using D&D Beyond for my character sheet, which means that it gets on my phone. But like, there's a difference between being on your phone, looking up a spell or whatever your attack is for that turn, and then switching over when it's not your turn to go like read text from your significant other. And like that's just rude. Like, you can be on your phone and be involved with the game as long as it's game related activity, but otherwise it's just not cool.
Not gonna lie, that's one of my big pet peeves about D&D Beyond, is that it gives people an opportunity to be an excuse to dig into your phone, and once you already have it in your hand, it's too hard to just walk away from that. So yeah, it is a very convenient tool, but it does come with some risks. That said, I use it because, again, I'm lazy and I don't own a printer.
Well, it's also it's personality dependent, right? Mm-hmm. So like when I have my character sheet open on my phone or my tablet, I by and large don't feel especially tempted to switch to other apps, especially because I'll turn the app into do not disturb mode, so I won't get messages during it. Because my feeling is like when I'm playing the game, code of silence, I'm playing the game. But there's some people where like I've played in campaigns where the rogue was spending like all of his combat basically sitting on his phone texting his fiance, and then it would get around to his turn and he'd be like suddenly like wake up and he's like, oh, what's my nearest target? And like he was a good player all around, but it's just that one particular thing was just like, God, Tony, get your shit together.
Please
like, yes, we're fighting a dragon now. Please be present.
Yeah, I can't agree any more than that, or more than I already have. Like that's exactly that. And then another thing you do need to let people know, it's not really a house rule, but it's one of the biggest things out there, is how are you going to level up?
Yes.
Experience points are milestone. I personally do milestone because, again, I hate math. But I know a lot of players like knowing exactly how much they're, where they stand, how they're doing, where they're going. I feel like in a sandbox game, having the experience points is more necessary. But that's also a lot more prep, because you need to have a couple batches of monsters that are based on experience point level and experience point buyout and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff going on that. Whereas if I'm running a scripted or not scripted, but a story campaign, well, it's like, well, by the time you guys get to the next town, you're going to level up. Boom, there we go, problem solved. But
I think you can do milestone in sandbox as well, though, because like even in a sandbox game, you're still going to have some sort of plot.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, like you'll have exhausted the entertainment value you get from a particular level, and it's time to level up. My main concern with experience points is that it creates perverse incentives, where it makes people go out of their way to find violent solutions to problems if they're not being rewarded for other ways of solving problems or other activities.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation that needs to happen. Like as a GM, if I'm doing experience points because they for some reason people want to do that, I reward all the aspects of the game. Everything that makes you a better character, that makes your character more experienced, gets experience points. Not necessarily how good are you stabbing goblins. Like that's not how this is working.
Like if you can find a non-violent solution to a problem, like you negotiate with the goblins instead of stabbing them, I think you should get the experience for that as well.
Negotiate with goblins. You're mad.
You joke, I've seen it happen.
I've seen it
Just
happen too, and then they goblins run off and steal someone's baby, and it's awful.
so my husband will at any given point in time start a proletariat uprising in basically any game. Um, and so when we were in the Lost Mine of Fandover, instead of raiding the goblin hideout and killing everybody, just installed a new puppet goblin government. Because of course he did.
Yeah,
but he got the experience from that, like leveled up at the end. Well done. You solved the goblin problem.
Yeah, but handling the problem or avoiding the problem altogether, you get the experience for that problem. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I think we've exhausted that topic. That seems pretty solid. Talk about how you're going to level up. Next one is our next, I guess, larger category within this episode are a little more softer topics. They're harder to quantify, harder to measure. It's basically we're calling it the social compact, the social contract, the social behavior. How are you going to be a good person at the table? Feel free to take point on this one. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Oh yeah, sure. So hold on, let me bring up the notes.
Oh, you're not following along? Okay.
No, I've been following along mentally. I haven't been reading it along as I've been.
You haven't memorized this?
I was looking at chat. Maybe they had something interesting to say. Yes. So social compact. So I think just like it's especially important if you haven't played with particular players before. If like they're people you don't know in another context. It's kind of setting expectations of what behavior is. So be respectful to each other.
What does that mean for your group? That's,
yes.
Like I know with the group I was playing with for the better part of a decade, how we interact with each other is completely different than how in a respectful manner. What we deemed as respectful there is completely different than what we would deem as respectful if we were playing with new people in the back of the comic book store.
Yes. Or is this a game with a child in it, right? Because sometimes you'll be running a venture game and there will be a child at the table. Well, then the social compact is going to be different from that situation than if it's a bunch of rowdy adults that you know from your own immediately social circle. So kind of like setting those expectations is important. And again, especially if they're a stranger, because unfortunately, when you're dealing with people you don't know very well, some people aren't going to be know unless they're told that you have to respect the other players and not be a dick.
Yeah.
And so kind of saying that out loud is sometimes important. Getting into this also being like, is PvP allowed in the campaign is another kind of related but important topic to touch on.
Yeah, no, that is very key there. We have Mr. Smithwick coming in and saying the difference between a good and a bad rogue. That ties perfectly into the PvP side of things there. It's like, yeah, the good rogue is the one that's going to go out and steal and loot from people who aren't the players. One who's going to go and pickpocket all of those people. If it's like, oh, I know the wizard has a magical ring and a bag of holding, well, I'm going to go cut his purse and just be like, oh, you lost it. Man, that's bad.
Yeah.
You're not being a good player there. So knowing and if that's the kind of behavior that your group is comfortable with, through years of playing with each other, you realize that works. Shut up, please. If you have that dynamic, that's fine. You can do that if that's what you've established. If it's not, though, and it's just this is what you want to do, and your rest of your party's not on board, it's not cool. You're being that guy again.
Absolutely. And again, like having that conversation early means that if it comes up to be an issue later, you can kind of go to Steve, we had this conversation before, and like I really feel like you're not really living up to the social compact that we previously discussed in the following ways, and here's different ways we can kind of go out ameliorating the situation and kind of restoring group harmony.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest conversations you have to have as a DM is the after session chat. It's like, hey, Doug, can you hang back for a minute? I just want to talk to you about what happened today. Uh, it's
Yeah.
awkward. It's confrontational, despite the fact that I just spent the last 3 hours chewing you apart with owl bears. This kind of this kind of back and forth where it's real life confrontation can be bad. Here we go. Again,
Yeah.
Mr. Smithwick just knocking it out of the park. If your fun is dependent on ruining other people's fun, you're playing it wrong. I'll extend that to if your fun is taking priority over everybody else's, or you having fun means that everyone else is an NPC to you. That's not what we're signing up for. Go play Skyrim. It's there's a lot of other ways to do it where you're going to be the lone adventurer. One of the great things about tabletop roleplay games is that it's a communal experience where we're all telling a story together. Nobody's winning, nobody's losing. Well, that's because you're a horrible person, Rob. Uh,
But I think you basically make an excellent point. Like, you really hit to the heart of the matter, which is, someone's fun should never come at the expense of somebody else, and it should never be a zero sum game. Like, everyone should
yeah,
be working together to enjoy the game as a collaborative experience. And if somebody's sucking the fun out of the game, that's something that has to be addressed, or it will kill the campaign.
yeah. And I've kicked people out of roleplay groups, not as for a first infraction, but it's like, hey, we've talked about this a couple times, man. Have you considered maybe playing a different game because everybody else here is up for something else that you seem to be on a different page for. We'll let you
Mm-hmm.
know when we start a new one and see if that's going to be more your speed. But for now, this is not the place for you. It's a terrible conversation to have, but sometimes you have to have it.
Absolutely. And kind of segueing into another sort of conversation that's not always fun to have, but is often very important to have, is talking about how, like, uncomfortable topics. So, where does topics of gender and sexual orientation fit into your campaign? Is racism and prejudice part of the setting? How is slavery handled? And I think kind of the big ticket item right now, especially in the current times, is sexual assault. Um, these are really the third rail of D&D campaigns oftentimes, and when talking about DM, like, RPG horror stories, a lot of times it's because one of these things basically just throws a stick into the bicycle spokes of the campaign.
Yeah,
Um, we've talked about this before, you and I off camera, but I think we're on the same page with this. So far as I'm concerned, sexual assault has no place in a role playing game.
yeah. It's not
Um,
even it doesn't happen on the table. It doesn't exist in my universes. Like if you're playing in any game that I'm playing, it's never happened in this universe. It's never you absolutely as a player are not allowed to do it. That is an infraction. I will kick you out and not invite you back ever again. My
mhm.
NPCs are never going to do it. If I need to use that to say that this guy's a bad guy, there's a million other ways I can make that without crossing that line. Like there's absolutely no way to do that.
Yeah, like and a lot of role playing games are by nature very violent games,
Yes,
but there's red lines that have to be drawn, and
absolutely.
I think like sexual assault is like a good rule of thumb. That should be a red line.
Yep.
um and if some people's if you think it's not going to be an issue, establish that red line early on. And there's other places where people may draw the line, like in this universe there is no racism, so you know your dwarf better not be bitching about your elf. It could be something like that. But like the real point is, role-playing games are a method of escapism. So even if
Yeah.
you want to tell a more serious grimdark sort of campaign, it's still an escapist campaign. And there's certain things that just don't have a place in this sort of collaborative story making environment.
Yeah.
And it's nothing good can come of it.
If I want to make my players uncomfortable because of something that the big bad did, I'm, it'll be awful. It'll be terrible. There'll be horrible songs and ballads wrote about it. But I'm gonna have to put the legwork in. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
have to choose something that's not just oh, I know Prim doesn't like this topic. Well, done. No, that's a cheap and b incredibly disrespectful to the players. Uh, don't do that. Yeah, flat out, don't do that. Yeah,
And on a related topic, like, um, you know, if you're playing the stereotypical horny bard, where you want to hit on everything in sight, don't hit on the other player characters. Just don't.
Yeah, don't make
It,
them
it,
have opposed roles ever against each other. That's not. Avoid that.
yes. Well, it's just like you don't want to have a situation where the other players are feeling like I don't want to be in this situation, and I don't want to I don't want to cause a scene by saying no to this. Like, just don't
Yeah,
cause a situation to begin with.
yeah. Generally, as a DM, one of the big rules that I follow is the only player who's allowed to take agency away from another player is me, and it will happen as a congratulations, you've been possessed by a ghost, or the wizard hits you with a beam of lightning and you're now his thrall. It'll be something along those where everybody at the table recognizes this is a bad thing. It's never going to be the bard rolled better than you, so off to the bard's room. No.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, which I think like opposed like charisma checks should kind of fall into the category of PvP,
Yeah,
like where it's an
absolutely.
adversarial sort of relationship.
If it
And
gets to the point where
other,
you have that, like there's a conversation happening,
mm-hmm.
and then it gets to the point where you need to start rolling dice, one party back down. Just be like, yeah, you know what, you make a good argument. Let's go. But as soon as it's, no, I'm unhappy with this, no, I'm unhappy with this, roll the dice, haha, dice say I win, I wouldn't do that. That's problematic. There can be times when that is appropriate, but overall, yeah, try to avoid having conversations like that. You guys are a team.
Absolutely. On a related point, like since we're kind of on this topic,
Yeah,
there needs to be a release mechanism for player discomfort. So if somebody's put in a situation that you know they find very uncomfortable for whatever reason, um, and it sometimes happens. Like sometimes even a well-intentioned DM will overlook like, oh, I didn't see how that could be
yeah,
something that's kind of a triggering event. Um, kind of lay it out. It's like, if at some point you are uncomfortable with something that's going on, you know, raise it up in the middle of the session if you feel comfortable doing so, or get in touch with me during your break or after the session. Let's talk about this because player comfort's very important. And I think that like
yeah.
establishing that as a baseline is, I think, a very good practice to have in a campaign.
Absolutely. Like if I'm trying to make if I'm trying to make someone uncomfortable or someone does feel uncomfortable, I better have been trying to. It would be a deliberate choice. And that's again a very rare. I'm trying to not do that kind of thing. And there are again those lines, those rails that I will not touch on those kinds of topics. But if I do hit one of those accidentally, I hit something that I didn't realize was a thing that you just shuts you down. Let me know. You can feel free to stop it. We're playing a game.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing I'm doing at this table matters. Like, stop me at that point. Just be like, hey, I'm not cool with this. All right, well, can I rejigger it and say, hey, the past 20 seconds didn't happen that way. He was instead putting babies on spikes? Okay, sure, that happened. Or we can't. We'll pause. Let's talk. How can we fix this, make this thing be better? This is the outcome I was looking for here. I wanted him to antagonize people and get you out to fight me. Cool. Well, there we go. He insulted me. Now we're fighting. Problem solved. Let's move forward. Let's get past this. This was, my goof. I stepped in an area I shouldn't have. But I think we should probably move on to more delightful topics. Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
How about character creation?
This is gonna just cause more blows. So yeah, as a one of the greatest things a session zero can do with the setting the tone of the campaign is actually create great opportunities for characters. I know there's a lot of schools of thought on this one. I typically don't have character ideas before I get to the campaign. That's just not. Oh, that's not how I operate. I'll be like, if I want to have a fun thing like that, I'll include them in something I'm going to run for people. But I like to sort of have seat of the pants fly. Let's make this go. Hearing from the GM what it is that his campaign or her campaign is going to be, like, hey, we're going to go and we're going to be fighting in the frozen north. It's like, oh, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to break out that walrus man stats that I have. Can I play as a walrus man? And they're like, yes, you can. I'm like, yeah, walrus for life. On that note, that's one of the really big reasons why I like to do that. Because hearing what's new, what the actual things are, the local denizens are, I can do something cool with that, and then the spark lightning hits there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that's a perfectly respectable way of doing it. Like I have a mix of like character ideas that I sort of have in the back of my mind that I like to find a campaign that would fit for them. But there are a lot of times when I'll join a campaign, so here's the general outline of what I'm looking for, and I'm like, oh, you know, it'd be really good for that campaign. I have this idea, and kind of like filling it in.
Yeah.
So I think there's benefits to different techniques, and I kind of approach it from different ways depending on what the campaign is and whether the inspiration strikes me. But at the very least, even if character creation isn't happening at session 0, there should definitely be a character creation sanity check at session 0.
Yeah, don't bring your spell. I don't know, your artificer. I think it's artificer.
I think it's artificer. Artificer.
Anyway, don't bring that guy to my thing that is, you know, we're not going to be interacting with that, because that's like a weird demi-plane like Strahd, isn't it? Or wherever Strahd takes place, because I'm completely blanking on stuff.
Strahd's a demi-plane. I don't know about the other one. But another example would be something like, you know, don't show up with a Vidalkin to a campaign that's set in Faerun, and you know, don't show up with
Barovia. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Barovia. So don't show up with like a Dragonborn at a Ravnica campaign. It's like those species don't exist in those settings.
Yeah. Or we're playing in the far north of the frozen or of the Forgotten Realms. You probably shouldn't be playing a dude who's native to Chult and has never traveled. Like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Even something more basic, like going back to when I ran the Epic, and so people were coming in with their what should have been Adventurers League legal characters, and there's a couple people that showed up with stats that they had rolled in private, and I'm like, no, you cannot start at level 1 with a 20 in your stats. Also, you can't roll for stats in Adventurers League. Let's get you a blank character sheet and start over. Yeah. And so, you know, sometimes just people will show up with illegal character sheets for one reason or another. And if you're like, you know, no, this is how we're going to be handling characters in this campaign. So, you know, put this on a shelf. You can maybe use this for a different campaign, but you can't use it in this one.
Yeah. Like that's one of the things I really like about in the character creation. I like running roll for stats. I like the extra randomness that comes into that. That's a debate for, I don't know, a punch 'em up episode that we'll have in the future. But I like the rolled stats. I like that extra stuff. But that is inherently needs to happen at the table. It's not that I don't trust my players, but it needs to happen. It's so that everybody has that check of, hey, Doug there just did in fact roll 3 18s. I'll personally step in and be like, hey, Doug, maybe re-roll those. Or that 6 is now a 3. Sorry, you still got a great stat, but you don't get these. Just because, you don't need someone running around who's, you know, Hercules and everyone else is the water boy. So you do have to have a little bit more curating in those kinds of systems, but I like having that happen. Mm-hmm. But what if your player comes and doesn't have an idea about about what they want to do?
That's really fun too. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's actually like one of the more fun things to do, which is, and it kind of can even flow out of the what are you looking for in this campaign and the tone conversation. So yesterday, for instance, I was kind of dropping into somebody else's campaign, but they were running through the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and it's kind of a very nautical sort of themed setting. But in session 0, they all decided that they were kind of going for some sort of like silly Scooby-Doo sort of mystery sort of theme. And so I rolled in there with a parrot person, and we got on famously. And we just kind of like everything was like very kind of over the top heroics, and we're just gonna be like, you know, super happy the whole time. And you know, there's other ones where you show up there and everything's a lot more like you were doing, like, you know, the kind of, you know, Sam Spade sort of thing. And I think that, you know, once you kind of establish tone and what people are looking for, I think you start saying, like, what are some fictional characters that you like that are sort of in the vein? And that's a good little thing. Or like also, like, you know, start with the character's backstory. Like, you know, you are a person. Where are you from? Mm-hmm. Who do you know? Where did you come from? What do you want? And kind of roll back from that way.
Where did you go? Where did you come from?
Cotton Eye Joe.
Sorry, but it was too easy.
No, that's fine. I don't blame you for that one. But there's a bunch of different ways of handling it, but definitely both the DM and the rest of the party can be a great resource for somebody who's struggling with character generation and a great sounding board for character ideas.
Here's one that I don't know if this is a popular or unpopular opinion, but it's something I've used. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. It's something I've used in the past, where if someone comes up and like, hey, I have absolutely zero ideas what I want to play. Well, you know what I need? I need an overall plot hook. Congratulations, new guy. You don't know what you want to play? Here's an idea for you. Maybe be the person who you're from this local area and you need, your farm's been attacked by goblins or raiders or chaos stars or whatever. Go grab some adventurers with help and bring them back and fight them off, and there you go. Or you're from the local merchants guild and you really want to go for adventure and you have to get this thing to the other town or anything like that. Yes, Cecil P. Hook. There we go. But use that as an advantage or as a way to sort of give them an immediate buy-in for their character, because most people who are going to be showing up and don't have an idea of what they want to play are probably newer characters. If like I said, I don't have an idea when I walk in, but I can very quickly bang one out once I figure out what I want to do. I have far too much time having played this genre. But if you don't know what you're going to play, you're a brand new player, and they come up to them and they're like, "Hey, I don't know how to fit into this." As a DM, be welcoming. Give them some tips. Give them immediate engagement, and be like, "Hey, you're the plot hook. You have this thing, or someone from your past is going to tell you this. You don't necessarily have to do this. Do the the first thing they do is they meet them in a tavern, be like, I've got a job, let's go." But someone can come up to you and be like, "Hey, can you help me with this thing or that thing or whatever?" You're a local, which is just a long way to say just make them the plot hook and move on with your lives. Automatic buy-in.
So another interesting thing, like if everyone's making their characters at the same time, it's an opportunity, if you want to do this, to have the characters integrate their backstories with one another, so they aren't just meeting in a tavern at session one.
Yeah.
So there's actually some systems that have that built in, like actually baked into the character creation process. For instance, Fate, when you're building your character, you have your bonds, and one of them needs to be someone else that's in the party. So that I've seen that happen sometimes in certain systems where it's baked in there, but you can also do that in any system if you want to do that.
Oh yeah.
And that can be fun. Like if it's done right, it can really be fun. Of being like, oh yeah, like Stacy and I go way back. We were at an adventuring party like 5 years ago. It's still gonna be an adventure with you again, Stacy. Stacy's a cool guy. So like that's an option.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't really do if everyone's in their own like little bubble, making their character like completely separate of the other overall creative process.
Yeah, that's having buy-in from everyone, because everyone joining up and meeting in a tavern is great and all, fine. Like, I'm not going to say I don't use that, because like 50% of my games that I run start with that because it works.
A classic never dies.
Yeah. But having some buy-in otherwise, I find that you can get some really interesting relationships that come out of that. Even if, like with the DCC, I'm going to keep harkening back to that. You are all from the same village. It wasn't a big village. Mind you, you had 16 characters among the 4 of you. So relationships really weren't that important. You took like a quarter of the village and left. But yeah, whatever. Just having that shared backstory, though, does make it so you're not learning about someone while they're going. If you do that, though, I do recommend having some kind of comfort of improv between the players. Just because if someone's like, "Hey, man, this is just like that thing that we did 3 years ago." That what? I don't remember that. No, it's like, but that gets into rules of improv, which is a different topic. We can get into that later.
Yeah. I do like Gingerbread 39 session of borrowing the last 2 paragraphs of your partner's backstory and shove it into yours. I like that. It's very lazy. It's great.
I'm all about it.
Work smarter, not harder.
That's what this whole thing is about. Is this whole series of videos is how to not learn the lessons this hard way. We share our lessons with you, so you get to be lazy like us.
Yeah, just don't make some of the mistakes I did.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's see.
Backstory homework.
Yes.
This is something that I know a lot of people have different ways that they approach on this. As a DM, I love that you care about your player, or you care about your characters, and you have all these great ideas. I'm gonna throttle them. like mechanically throttle, not like sit there and choke your character out. Uh, because generally, I don't want you to have. I don't want you to have been the generalissimo that did this and fought that and killed these and did all these dragons. Like, no, if you're a first level adventurer, you have a first level backstory. Sorry.
Yeah. You are just one step above peasant scum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the general rules that I do is I say grab a 3x5 card. On one side of that, write their name, their date of birth, their name, relative age, basically the top block of your character sheet. Age, race, religion if they have one, class, the things that mechanically matter.
Mm-hmm.
On the back, 3 to 5 bullet points that are a simple sentence that tell me about your character. Things would include where they're from, what they were doing before they were adventuring, why they decided to go adventuring, and if you want to, give me phobias, give me something they like, give me something they hate, give me that kind of thing, that so that I can start peppering it in and give you the really easy layup RP reactions. And then I can carry those all around, put them into my Rolodex, and I'm good. Like that's all I need to know about your backstory of your characters. Play within these bounds. Let's have a good time. But I know other people don't agree with that.
Well, I think that there are a lot of people out there that just they write their 18-page backstory because they get invested in the character, and they basically write a little fantasy novel that's a super detailed backstory for that. And I know that because I used to be that guy. And I think as I've gotten older and more experienced of doing role-playing games, I find that's actually more of a hindrance than anything else.
Absolutely.
Where I like the ability to sort of spontaneously go like, you know what, actually, so this ties to my character's backstory that I just made up, because like being able to like be more adaptive and go like yes and opportunities as they come up.
Absolutely.
Is like it's a flexibility that's really nice to have, that your, again, 18-page backstory is not just going to provide to you. But the other side of the coin, I always try to make sure that my character has, a couple of family members who have names, and I know what their relationship is to those people.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I try to come up with, 3 to 5 people that my character is close to and cares about, even if like they could be an enemy, an old classmate, a spouse, a child, a parent, somebody that like creates a context this person comes out of. Because there's so many people that come up to D&D campaigns. They just like, I'm an orphan, I don't know who my parents are, and my 2 bonds are my 2 knives. Like it's like
Stabby and Pablo.
yeah, Stabby and Pablo. Like everyone has met that D&D character, and I don't get it. I'd much rather have like the character be a person with a sense of the world.
Yeah.
So like having an outline of who that person is without being too wholly committed to the subtle nuances of it, I think gives you structure without having too much commitment.
Yeah, that's key. I don't write any of that down because, but I generally have I have an idea of who the character is. I say, oh yeah, I know that he has a couple contacts in this city, but I can't be bothered to write it down. So my trick there, and this is something I learned from DMing, is I have a list of names by race and gender. And if someone's like, "Oh, hey, you remember that Dwarven Smith that you had that you were talking about in, or do you know a Dwarven Smith in this city?" Like, actually, I do. His name is next Dwarven name I haven't used. Ah, yes, it is this guy. Boom, there we go. Write the note down and move on with my life. And then that's me. Don't necessarily look at that as the golden standard, but it works for my DMing, so it works for my my PC.
Meanwhile, Rob's over here with some really salient points in the chat over here. We need to have your character's taxation policy worked out. So definitely, you should know whether or not your character's a libertarian. It is a very important thing to establish very early on.
Yeah.
But yes, abbreviated character backgrounds. I think we're on the same page with that. A couple traits, couple plot hooks, a good loose list.
Yeah.
Robin there with the the good points.
For me, it all boils down to it's a literary piece of advice. But is ask yourself the question: is this the most interesting time in my character's life? If not, why am I not showing you that? Don't give me someone who's lived a life and had all the adventures. No, the adventure is here. Let's do this.
I think you can do that, but it's something like you could do like the
the
over the hill, the over the hill wizard who retired from adventuring is getting back into it for X, Y, or Z reason, and he'd be just like back in my day. Like you can pull that off, but it's gonna be you have to be careful about how you do it.
Yeah,
one
of the ones I really like is the old soldier who's been broken by war and has taken up the arcane arts or has taken up thieving or any of that other stuff. So there's a demonstrable shift from where he's been, and he's not a level 80 character despite the fact of having spent 40 years in war. Whatever happened, he's lost all that, and he's doing a change of path. So most of that experience is non-applicable to what we're doing today. And boom, you have an interesting backstory. It doesn't matter too much. Sneeves. What is Sneeves? Does anybody there know what Sneeves is in the chat? It helps prevent Sneeves.
Yeah,
Gingerbread 39.
Yeah, what's a Sneeves?
Oh, okay, he's saying, "Oh, please explain Sneeves." Okay, I don't know what that is. Will in Discord. Okay. Well, that's
all right. But kind of while we're on that topic of character creation and deciding who they are and what they want,
I'm gonna Google it.
so let me do that. A character alignment.
Sneezing into your sleeve. It looks like a hanky that goes over your elbow. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm listening.
Sorry. So character alignment, I think, is something that also needs to get ironed out. And session 0, the lawful good paladin and the chaotic evil rogue are probably not going to fit in the same campaign together. If the party wants to roll an evil campaign and the DM is okay with it, that's fine.
Yes.
But there's been so many times where I've been in a game where I've struggled to justify why my character would remain in the party. It was just like, you are murdering people and getting away with it. I am a good aligned character. I can't think of a reason to just turn you into the police.
Yeah, that falls into the category of don't be evil stupid. I'm okay with evil characters, but in my games I generally have to put the firm rule of no evil characters because a lot of people's version of evil is Snidely Whiplash, tying ladies to the train track for no reason. Just I'm evil and I'm going to do it. So yeah, that's a problem because it does exactly what you're talking about. It destroys group cohesion.
Yeah, it's just like if everyone wants to go for a murder hobo party.
Sorry. Okay, so for anybody,
Bobbin the Goblin.
But yeah, so Gingerbread 39 also DMs and doesn't make up character NPC names because they're the least important line on the stat line, frankly. And apparently, when she panics, she names them Sneeve. And there's that famous trope going around of Boblin the Goblin being someone who doesn't know what it's like, oh, hey, there's a goblin at the bar. Tell me about that goblin. His name is Boblin? It's like Crentus the Dentist, if you've watched The Office. It's a I've made a name up on a fly kind of thing. And then...
Actually, like, coming up with goblin names on the fly is one of the things I'm worst at, but also the most fun part about playing a game. It's like, the party captions a goblin. It's like, what's their name? Like, Zub. And so naturally, Zub wants a... Oh, here's the thing. Zub became an NPC for several consecutive sessions because they adopted Zub.
Excellent.
Yes.
I'm going to brag here a little bit. Goblin names is something I'm very, very good at, but that's because I play a Goblin Blood Bowl team, and when a player dies, I need to come up with a new name for the next character who's going to be taking his spot, and they die a lot. So in a 3-game tournament, I burned through 4 teams. So that can happen.
So spoilers for Storm King's Thunder. One of the earliest encounters is you go across this village that's been overrun with goblins,
Ooh,
And
classic.
so we're playing through this, and the DM's just like giggling every few minutes, and we're like, "What?" And she's like, "I'll tell you later." And then at the end, she's like, "Every single of these goblins, every single one of them has a name. The book names every single one.
Oh, that's
The one that was over
amazing.
here, his name was this," and it's just like they have the adorable names too. Like that,
Goblin
whoever
names
wrote
are the
that book,
greatest.
yeah, whoever wrote the book really knocked it out of the park. With it's just like, on the off chance you capture this random goblin and want to know about his life, here's what he's about.
That is fantastic. I've seen some things in pre-writs where it's like everybody has a name, but if you capture them, they all have the same backstory. So it's like so it doesn't matter who you capture. You're probably going to capture one or two, at which point they know each other and they have very similar backstories. But yeah, whatever. You're going to get the plot hooks you need.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's backstories. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. What races, classes, subclasses are acceptable and which are not allowed? Does your DM allow multiclassing?
Yes. I know there are a lot of people that kind of come into a game, even at session 0, with the plan of like, oh, I'm gonna, do a warlock, paladin multi-class to get all these sort of stats, and
Better be a warlock of or a paladin of Cthulhu at that point, because no.
I mean, that's kind of where I land on it.
Yeah,
Where like, I feel like multi-classing should be rare and only justified by character development.
absolutely.
But there's some people that their joy in a game is min maxing it. And if everyone in the game is a min maxer and that's what they want out of the game, then sure. Like session 0, multi-class to your heart's content, try to break this game over your knee. That's what we're about. Um, I'm not about that life though.
Yeah, I don't need that kind of math homework. I'm gonna go ahead and level with everybody out there. I'm bad with rules. I'm awful with rules in a vacuum, and I'm awful with min maxing. With making optimized lists. I do a lot of like Warhammer, and I've been able to use that to my advantage to be able to build lists or do some weird things with rules and official tournaments and stuff like that, because everybody knows I'm not a good player. So I can do it's like, oh yeah, sure, you can run those guys as this other thing, and I paint really well, and there we go. But if I was a really good player and I was really good at oh you cat and I was really good at min maxing it, then that's a kind of different thing. But it's a weird tangent. Um, Generally, I've never outlawed multiclassing. I've discouraged it because if you decide to start taking level 1 and stuff of other classes, you're not going to be leveling up the rates you need to. It gets weird, and I don't typically outlaw any particular race, class, or subclass. But what I frequently will do is I'll limit your source material. You can only pull from PHB and Xanathars. Most of my campaigns are that. If I'm doing Pathfinder, I'll usually say you can only pull from I think it's just the regular rulebook and the companion books for this campaign, because Pathfinder has all the problems that old D&D had, where there was just 1.5 million library books of content, and as a GM, I can't know that. I can't understand all the random things that and I don't like flying by the seat of my pants on both sides of the screen. So, know your stuff and limit it, please. Do me a favor.
Yeah. Well, it's also like there's a lot of times where they'll have like very setting specific uh, rules for different settings that aren't meant to be mixed.
Yeah.
And so if you're pulling things from 5 different rule books, odds are you're up to no good. So I'm with you. I think like the Adventurers League has it set up where it's PHB +1, which I think is a nice
yeah. Most of those
baseline.
complement pretty well.
Yeah. But yeah, just definitely like, and there's sometimes you can just say like flat out like, no, you can't play a bugbear.
Is that a playable class?
It is. So that's why I'm still getting like, what are the playable races? Is it PHB only, or is it
and Volos. Do I have Volos?
Yeah, Volos. Volos
I do have Volos.
So like you can do like Aarakocra and Volos, Kinkus and Volos.
See, I kind of like Kinkus because they're not particularly wild in anything. They don't fly. They're not going to ruin anything for me. But the Aarakocra can fly, and then that makes it so I need to completely rebuild my my dungeons.
this actually ran into this issue literally yesterday,
What?
where I I so I often will find a piece of fantasy art that I really like, and then I'll say like, well, I'm gonna use this as a D&D portrait later. And so a year ago, I found this really cool piece of art where it was a macaw that was a monk, and it was
A monk
dope
call?
as hell. Yeah, a macaw,
Hmm.
and it was cool as hell. I wanted to play a character with like a macaw that was also a monk. So I show up and I'm like, I rolled up. Here's a macaw monk, and the DM's like, this character is really cool and I like everything about it, but I don't like the flying speed. And so we wound up doing this. We wound up reskinning Kinku. So I was able to get basically all the things that I wanted um, without the flying speed, which I didn't really care about. I just wanted to be a dope macaw person.
Yeah.
Um, and I did get the ability to mimic any sound perfectly, which is
Ooh.
hilarious if you're a macaw.
Yeah, that works.
So it's just about like you can have the conversation with your DM. Like, here's the character I really want to do. I have this great idea. Is it going to fit with your setting? And then you may not get everything you want, but it gives
I'll
your
work with you.
DM,
Yeah.
yeah, like it gives the opportunity to meet you halfway and work with you to come up with a solution that's going to work both with their campaign and with your really cool idea.
Yeah, that's my big rule for any kind of why I'm cutting things out isn't because I don't want players to have fun with stuff. I'm doing it because I know how to write Dungeons and Dragons in the same. My style hasn't shifted, and at this point, I'm not going to shift it. I've tried, and it just doesn't work to start incorporating all these other random things in there. I'll try, and I'll keep trying, but I know my own limitations. Adding like flying or something that can like naturally teleport. I don't know if that's a thing yet, but something that has weird movement shenanigans or something that will break the game in a way that I really don't feel comfortable with. I'll generally try and be like, all right, well, can we reskin that over an existing class or race and let you be this character, but we're going to take away a lot of your special abilities you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, if I don't know what my players can do, it's really hard to build balanced encounters for them. Like if I think they can all fly, cool. I'm going to build something that requires everybody to fly, but nobody can fly. Well, they've all drowned. Like that. That's a thing. So it's not because I enjoy being withholding. I do, but that's it's more because I'm trying to build a good game world for the people that are playing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of in the same vein, Unearthed Arcana, which is playtest material that Wizards has released early that they may or may not publish in a later supplemental book. You usually see existing Unearthed Arcana if you look into D&D Beyond, it's looking for like different races and classes,
Yeah.
and they'll be listed. But some of them are not balanced because they're still playtesting them, and so if you want to try out some of the playtest material, you have to ask your DM first.
And I always do a hard no. Like, sorry, but no, I don't know that. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure it's a really great idea. It's a really great thing, but sorry, I can't do this unless we sit down, we actually talk about it in person, and have these conversations and figure out how we can make this fit. I simply can't, I can't know it. I have so many other books I need to know. I can't know the thing that's going to change at some point in the near future.
I think like one exception to that I think that's worth discussing is the Unearthed Arcana for Ranger.
What's wrong with regular Ranger?
So the regular Ranger, as is written in the PHB, is sort of significantly weaker than a lot of the other classes, where they're kind of built around like your favorite terrain, and if you're not constantly in the favorite terrain, you're kind of operating at a handicap.
Yeah, it's a weird mechanic.
So they released an Unearthed Arcana where it's kind of like a patched Ranger, where it makes it much more of a more fully functional class. And so a lot of times people will say it's, PHB +1 and Unearthed Arcana for Ranger if you want to go that way. Like that particular Unearthed Arcana seems to exist in a separate space than the other ones.
Yeah.
To the point where a lot of people think it's going to eventually, like if they ever did a PHB 2.0, they'll probably put that in that version of the PHB.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But that also does tie into the idea of campaign setting. You have this conversation beforehand, and you're playing a ranger out of the PHB. and you want to have the backstory of you're from the hot deserts of somewhere not here, but the whole thing's going to be taking place in the north. It's like, well, if you play one and make the frozen north count as your same thing, we can hammer out some of the kinks there. Otherwise, yeah, go with the Unearthed Arcana one. That makes a lot of sense. You just have to have the conversation with your players.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, is there anything else going on in the chat? Let's see. Monk Caw brings Gingerbread 39 joy. That's why we brought it up. I'm happy we can make that happen for you. Any other questions from the chat? We have somebody talking about geeking the mage in Shadowrun, but it's Shadowrun, so we're just gonna, and it's Rob, so we're just gonna ignore it. Kenkus are kind of horrible, though. Yeah, but they're like the cool kind of horrible.
I'm not concerned about my characters being optimized so much as being fun to play. Yes, there's more powerful options, but that's not why I'm playing a Monk Caw.
Yeah, if I wanted to play, have the most powerful thing, I'd play a Dwarven Wizard. So.
Oh, by the way, that's actually I figured out like what the technical name for a bird's ear is, because they don't have like the exterior ears like mammals do.
Yeah.
So my character's like putting her side of her head up to the doors and listen to what's inside.
Like cooing gently, rubbing up against it, like what?
Well, there's just like you just places her because there's still an ear hole there.
Yeah.
And so if someone's like doing some practical, it's like it's auriculars. They're called auriculars. And so we had fun working that word into every conceivable opportunity for the rest of the session.
Okay, so yeah, Rob was saying that the racial stereotypes suck, and yeah, why do you think I want to play a Kenku? Like, I'm playing a horrible, that's I'm playing that. Like, I play Skaven for Ratmen for 30k or for not 30k for Age of Sigmar. I play goblins because they're awful. Like, these are things that I'm steering into that curve. Yeah, fun over OP every day of the week. Gingerbread 39. That's my philosophy for how to make this all go. And beep boop. Okay, cool.
I think we're not really addressing.
What's in this treasure chest? Oh
no! It was on a pirate ship. I thought the odds of anyone given door being a mimic to be relatively low, but you're probably right. I got lucky.
I want to figure out a way to domesticate mimics. Like, I think that'll be key.
I think we're kind of skipping over the really important question here, which is Gingerbread 39. I need you to hook me up with your best gingerbread recipe, because I figure if you name yourself after the cookie, you probably have a pretty good recipe for it.
She could also just like gumdrop buttons. Like, you don't know her life or his life. I think it's her. I don't know.
He or she or they can tell us in the
chat.
But anyway, I definitely hook me up with your best gingerbread cookie recipe, because
because we're all bakers now.
Oh God, my husband has made so much bread over the past few months. So much bread.
I saw a recipe for naan that I need to try, because it's not a whole lot. Ooh, see, I go with without molasses, and I go with dark brown sugar, and that mixes in and doesn't change the consistency. Anyway, I think we've pretty much exhausted this. Not the gumdrop buttons. Yeah, okay, we've gone way off the rails here. So
we got an hour and a half of content and then 10 minutes of gears. I think that's a fine mix.
So Prim, do you have any parting words that you want to push out for all of the peoples?
Yeah, I just think kind of like the footstep we started with, the end, the guiding light should be, have an intelligent adult conversation with the rest of your party, set expectations, make sure that everyone is clear about what they want and what the guidelines are, what the barriers are, the red lines, and have that conversation early and often so that everyone's on the same page going forward and everyone has the D&D experience that they hope and they want to get.
Yeah, that sums it up. We're not experts. We're not telling you how to do it right or wrong. Just, give everybody the experience they're looking for. Make sure everybody leaves with a smile on their face more often than not, and you're probably going to be doing it pretty well for yourselves. So unless there's anything else from the chat, I think we're going to go ahead and sign out here. But remember, guys, starting tomorrow at 7 p.m., The Velkin Weave is back again. They were doing something great last week. I'm not going to butcher their plot points. It's a great show. My power cut. I don't know exactly where they ended. But the Velkin Weave is going to be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. And we'll hope to see you all there.
And don't forget to tune in to watch Mac and I on the WMD stream on Thursday.
Oh, I figured they'll plug us tomorrow. That's them.
I'm gonna plug me too. I gotta be on that hustle.
Very fair. All right. Well, unless there's anything else from the chat, we had a great time digging into all this. Thank you so much for engaging with us, and we hope to. We'll see you all tomorrow or Thursday or next week. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Nope. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Bye. I need my hand to do this.